Right, welcome again to this session whereby we'll be talking all about unit testing, integration testing, mocking, and also coverage report within the application tests. So we'll be using JUnit test containers, and then in that, because we are using MySQL as one of the databases within the application, we want a replica of the test environment to emulate the production environment. So that means using test containers, you'll be able to leverage a throwaway MySQL application whereby you're able to create your own database and be able to run the test and then throw away that particular MySQL database. So let's sit back and relax and just enjoy the video. Remember to practice as whatever we are doing here just the basics of what you expect, but then once you're able to do the testing, you'll be in a good position to understand the end-to-end integration of different services. As you start with a single unit, then you're able to do the integration tests, and then you'll be able to aggregate the entire application. Will be ideally tested and future-proof, and also we'll be able to ensure that you're able to have a quality code. So to get started, we are just going to open the test container website. So we're in just to search for test containers website, and with this, you open the first link here, test containers for Java. I think I'm going to use this, but then let's just go through the homepage of this particular website. As you can see, it will be quite simple to start up applications in terms of the particular dependencies. So just click on get started, and to just get started, you'll be able to see the normal process of test container is that you'd have an API gateway which you'll be able to request service A to get some data, and service A has the particular service class which connects to the database, and this one will be treated as one particular unit. Then you'll be able to see that all these, you can be able to bootstrap test containers for message brokers like Kafka, RabbitMQ, and others using test containers. So the benefit of this one is to be able to give us a replica of our production environment, as opposed to us testing with a different database whenever you're working on tests, and then testing on a different database whenever we are working with production. So to get started, I'm just going to click on modules. So I'm going to go up here and click on modules. And now for this particular modules, you're going to select the particular language, which is Java. And for this one, we are going to do check what we have. You can see that we have a different test containers for different services. So what I'm going to do is search for MySQL. As you'll be able to see that I want to work with the MySQL, so I can just search here MySQL. You can be able to see that I have my SQL relational database. So once I click that, I'm going to click on this is how you'll be able to start your MySQL container. So you'll be able to have a variable which is going to hold the MySQL variable, and then MySQL container, and then docker image name.parse, the latest version of MySQL, and then you're able to start that particular MySQL that way. So if I wanted to see the documentation of this, I can just click on this icon here, which is going to direct me to the documentation of me integrating with MySQL. So this is the actual integration or the documentation for MySQL. But then to get started, we just going to have Maven. So we need this particular org test containers MySQL. So I'm going just to copy this, but then show you how you're going to have our dependencies. So we're going just to copy this MySQL dependency from here and go to a POM file within the department service. Scroll to the last section of our dependencies. I'm going to add that particular MySQL 1.19.8, and the scope will be as test. All right, so the next thing that we need to ensure that we have, after having this, we need to ensure that we are able to make use of JUnit. So we are making use of JUnit. So what you're going to do is go to the quick start, and we are going to do quick start for JUnit 5. So for that, we going down here and click on Maven. So adding test containers, test scope dependency. So here you just to click here, and then we can see that we have Jupyter. If you are working with Spring Boot, you'd have the Jupyter dependency added by default. Now what you just need to do is have this additional two dependencies for test containers and JUnit Jupyter test container. So what you need to do is have that one immediately above the MySQL test container. So you have to have this particular dependency, which is saying to be test containers and then JUnit Jupyter, and that is coming from test containers, and then we are able to have MySQL test container. And with that, one last item that I'm going to use, I'm going to make use of another assertion library, which is AssertJ. So I'm going to open another tab here, and I'm going to do AssertJ dependency. So I'm going to go to this AssertJ Fluent Assertion Java library, whereby you can be able now to see how well you can be able to make use of it. So I'm going to scroll down and obtain the current version of AssertJ. So I'm going to copy this particular dependency, and I'm going to have it here. All right. So you might be asking a question. Whenever we are working with Spring Boot, we usually don't require a lot of dependencies, as I have just indicated here. So I'm going just to show you, if we go to Spring Initializer project here, Spring Initializer project, and then we are going to select a few dependencies just to show you what you need. So we are going to search for test containers. So at the moment, this particular dependency has been made available as a starter. So if you explore here, you'll be able to see that we can make use of Spring Boot test containers, and then automatically it will come with JUnit Jupyter dependency. So I'm going to also add another one for MySQL. So let me add MySQL driver, and you'll be able to see that automatically it will be able to determine whether whenever I add MySQL, then automatically it will add the dependency for MySQL test container. So given that, I'm going just to copy these three dependencies, and those are the ones that I'm going to replace with what we just added here. So I'm going just to copy and replace that. So you can see that now the Spring Boot test containers will be the starter, the Spring Boot starter for working with test containers, and then I'm going to also have by default JUnit Jupyter and also the MySQL container. So whenever you're using like instances of MySQL, and then you select the test containers, automatically the Spring Initializer project will be able to set the dependencies for you. So you don't have to start working from scratch, as I had shown you earlier. So that is the benefit of using the Spring Initializer project to bootstrap your application. Now, the last dependency that I'm going to do is going to be Mockito, because we require to mock our services. Whenever we be able to mock the repository, so we need to work with Mockito so that we are able to test things in a manner of a unit. So Mockito. So I'm going just to search for Mockito, and for Mockito framework site, you go there. And then from here you'll be able to see that we need to get the current version. So I might just look at how you click how, then we require to have the Mockito Core 3+ and over. So we need to search for this one within the Maven Central. So I might just to click here on this particular Maven Central link, and then I think I just need to do Maven Central. I'm going to search Maven Central and come here under Maven Central. I'm going to search for that particular dependency, Mockito Core, and you can see that the current version is 5.12.0. So I'm going to click that. Okay, yeah, so you can see I need now this particular dependency within my application POM file. So that is the last dependency that we are going to use to do the tests. So that is the initial setup of our tests dependency that we require. And now let's go to the fun stuff and start doing our tests. So how do I create tests for my application? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with the repository layer, right? So this particular repository layer, we need to test it. We need to test this custom method that we have written. Now, how do we start the testing? Now, we are going to start with the testing of the repository layer in the very basic manner. And this particular basic manner is going to be testing for this particular method, which is going to find by the department name. All right. So what you're going to do here is going to ensure that you're able to right click here. I'm going just to right click here, and then I'm going to go to test. All right, go to test. That is within VS Code, and then from there it doesn't find the test, so it's going to prompt me to generate the test. Then from there I'm going to use JUnit 5. Then from here you can see that automatically it's going to have the same structure in the tests files as my application production code, and in this case you'll be able to see that it appends hyphen test at the end. So I'm going just to select that as enter, and then select the method that I want to find to write the test for, and click OK, and you can be able to see that automatically this has generated a test for me. So let me try to run this one by default, and you'll be able to see that at the moment there is no test that is going to run. Ideally there's nothing that we are doing, right? The test doesn't do anything. There is no assertions that we are making. Now, mostly you find that many guys try to make use of a Spring Boot tests. So they end up making use of the Spring Boot test. And with this particular notation, it means that you're going to bootstrap the entire application for you to have this particular test. Let me walk you through by running that particular test again. Alright, so you can see it did start the entire application. As you can see under my debug console within VS Code, you can see that everything was started and started up and shut down, and that is because we are making use of the entire application context. So what I'm going to do to denote that I want to do JPA test for this particular, I want to test the interaction within my application and the database, I'm going to annotate this one as JPA data JPA tests. So this one alone will be able to ensure that I don't start the application. As you can see, my actual test results that it took quite a while for it to be able to run. Yeah, so it takes time to run the entire context. So we usually use a Spring Boot JPA Spring Boot test to do integration test. So for now, I'm going just to make use of data JPA test because I'm testing the repository. Now the next thing is that we need to interact with the database, and we want a replica of our production database which is making use of this particular MySQL. So we want to make use of another version, same version of MySQL as we are doing on the actual application code. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to have another indicator which is going to indicate to us that we need to make use of test containers. So to do that, we are going to make use of test container annotation. So I'm going just to do here at test containers. So we need to annotate this class as test container, meaning that we are going to test containers. Whenever we are running this test, it's going to try and create the application or the services that are annotated at service. So what we're going to do next is going to ensure that we're able to have our test container started. So to do that, we are going to make use of a simple annotation which is going to be container at container. All right, and then once you have that, then we are going to have the other thing to define that we want a service connection. So this means that we are going to have a service connection. Then these two annotations are the one that you need to ensure that you are able to have your declaration of your container. So from here, I'm going to also have static. This is going to be static Now we're going to make use of MySQL, so I'm going to make use of MySQL container. So container, all right, and then this one is going to be in quotes generic. It's a generic container class, so sorry for that. Yeah, and then from here we need now to define the actual value, which is going to be MySQL container, right? Then the value of this is going to be defined as from the documentation. Maybe I can just walk you through the documentation also. We're going to go to modules and then databases and then MySQL module. All right, so under here you're going to see that whenever we want to use this one, we need to have also okay, so for that we are going to go back to the quick home of this, and then we can scroll down. After setting all that, then we are going to do the modules and then databases, database containers, then the overview of that. Then we are going to go to MySQL down here as where is it? MySQL, Postgres, MySQL. Then from here you can be able to see that we need to define ideally this is the connection that we are going to get from the database. So we are using test container, and then this is going to be the connection URL. But then you're going to see all these particular values within the application. Right, so from here we are just to annotate and say we want a new instance of MySQL container. All right, then we are going to make use of docker image name dot parse. So we are going to parse what value. So we are going to run a particular MySQL image. Now from our previous tutorial for the employee service, you did realize that I had a Docker compose file. And this particular, we are making use of MySQL latest. So I'm going to copy this image tag, and that is what I'm going to have the full image name, right? So you can see that I'm going to start my service connection, a sample service for MySQL using the MySQL latest. So I'm going to have that. So that is how you ensure that you have the actual service connection. So what is this disallowed in this location? So we need to have, what is this? Sorry, I'm using the dispatcher. I need to import from the test container so that we have that. So that's how we ensure that. Now let's write a few tests to ensure that this particular service is up before we start testing. So we're going to have a simple test here to confirm that our service is actually up and running. So I'm going to have JUnit Jupiter, and then we're going to do void can establish connection. So we're going to have that. Then we're going to have just that particular simple method. And for this, we're going to refer to this MySQL container. So we're going to say assertions. So I'm going to show you from the AssertJ library. I need to go up here, and what I need to do is just to import this particular assertion. So I'm going to do import static AssertJ.co.api assertions within my tag here. So that is first thing that I'm going to do. Then from there I can do assert that. Right? So assert that the MySQL container dot is running. Right? So we need to check whether it's first created, and then from there we can say is true. Right? So that is the first thing that we are going to do. So we are going to assert that the container is started before we run even the other tests. And then the other one that you're going to do is assert that the container is running. All right, running is true. So that's the first test that you're going to do. Now let's just run this particular test and confirm that we're able to establish connection before we go further. All right, as you can see is that it's going to try making use of Docker desktop, and then try to pull the image. Right, once it pulls that image, then it will be able to start a container for that, and then it will be able to run a container using the MySQL latest, And then you can see that it's starting, waiting for database connection to become available, and this is the actual URL that we can be able to connect to, and that is ideally when it's connecting and checking for liveness. All right, so you can just give it a minute and confirm. So you can see all that is done. Okay, so largely you'll be able to have the same error with me. All right, is for my case. You can see now I wanted to show you this error is that we need one particular exception, and that is to ensure that our database, instead of it bootstrapping its own particular database, trying to connect to a different database, we need to tell it that we are not going to do the actual manual configuration. So we're going to have another annotation here, which is going to be at auto configure database. So we're going to do auto where is this now? Auto configure database. All right, test database, ideally this one. Right, so we're going to tell it auto configure test database, then we're going to make use of the value as replace to be none. So we're going to make use of replace of none. So we're going to make use of auto configure database replace none. All right, so this is what we're going to have as the third annotation for this one, to ensure that now this one will be able to run successfully. So let me run again this particular tests once again. Right, within the debug console, you can see everything coming up nicely, and now we are waiting for the connection to the database, and waiting for everything to come up, and our test now should be green once everything comes up. Alright, so you can see that it's also able to run the actual entity generation, and then from there it does shut down. You can see that now it did shut down after creating the instance and creating the database and everything. Now it did shut down, in that we don't have any additional test. So you can see that now our test is actually running and quite okay. Now in the next session we are going to now start writing the test for the test find by department name. Remember to subscribe and like the video, and in case you have issues, just comment on the video below, and then I'll be able to respond, and also the other team members will be able to assist you in terms of unlocking the team from the comment section. Thank you. Remember to subscribe and share. Thank you.